Madison Lockwood had always believed she understood the meaning of silence, but that cold November morning redefined it entirely. The silence inside the funeral home was not gentle, not peaceful, not noble. It was suffocating, cruel, strangling her like invisible hands around her throat as she stood beside the coffin of her twin brother, Matthew Lockwood, the one person on earth who had once known her heartbeat just as his own. She could still feel the phantom sensation of him, as if he should have been breathing beside her, smirking, nudging her with his elbow because she looked too serious, telling her to relax. But now his chest was still, his body lifeless. And she felt as though someone had sliced her existence into two and buried half of it beneath the cold wood now covered in flowers. Everyone whispered. They whispered about how tragic it was, how shocking, how sudden. But what no one whispered about, what no one knew, was that Madison had not spoken to her brother in 6 months. They had fought. Over business. Over pride. Over something so insignificant that now it tasted like ashes in her memory. She couldn't even remember the last words she had said to him. She only remembered that they were angry. Full. Final. And now there would never be a chance to take them back. But worse than that, worse than the hollow pit that had opened inside her chest, was the sight of Kate. Kate Lockwood. The widow. Her brother's wife. 29 years old.
Pale.
Fragile. Holding their little daughter, Effie, on her lap, while the 2-year-old clutched a stuffed rabbit, not understanding why everyone was so sad, not understanding why her father wasn't coming back. Something had shifted in Madison that morning. Something she didn't understand yet. A feeling she couldn't quite name. But it felt like gravity. It felt like fate. It felt like responsibility. The moment the funeral ended, Kate stood outside holding Effie, shaking uncontrollably from grief and cold air, and Madison, who had attended thousands of board meetings and signed billion-dollar contracts without blinking, found herself speechless. She walked toward them, her shoes crunching softly on the gravel, her black coat framing her like armor, though she felt anything but strong. She didn't say anything, not at first. She just looked at Kate, and Kate looked at her. And in that silence, within all those other layers of silence, there was something raw and terrifying and strangely familiar, as if they were both standing at the edge of something neither of them could see, but both of them could feel was coming. "Come with me," Madison finally said, voice soft, yet firm.
Please.
"Just let me help." Kate didn't answer right away. She looked away, blinking back tears, adjusting Effie's tiny pink scarf. She looked exhausted, brittle, lost. Madison knew Kate had no stable income now, that Matthew had been their primary provider, that the apartment they lived in was rented, that hospital bills had drained their savings. Kate had no family nearby, except for Madison. Madison, who had been a shadow in her life these last months because there had been tension between the siblings. And yet Kate nodded, almost imperceptibly, and in that nod was something like surrender, but also something like relief. The drive to Madison's estate felt dreamlike. The early winter sky was gray, the roads quiet, the world seeming to echo their grief. Effie fell asleep in her car seat, cheeks puffy, holding her rabbit. Madison drove while Kate sat silently in the passenger seat, her eyes fixed on the landscape, but not really seeing any of it. When they arrived, a sweeping driveway led to Madison's home, a modern glass and stone house tucked into the hills, overlooking the city skyline. It was elegant, warm, with large windows and lights that glowed softly as the dusk set in. Madison carried the luggage. Kate held Effie, whose tiny fingers reached out, touching Madison's coat as if already recognizing something safe, something comforting. Inside, everything smelled like cedar and vanilla. The fireplace had been lit by the staff. Madison walked ahead, suddenly uncertain. She didn't know how to comfort anyone. She only knew how to build companies, how to negotiate, how to command respect. But grief didn't care about power. Loss didn't listen to logic. And Kate stood in the doorway of the living room, looking so heartbreakingly small, wearing a black coat too thin for the weather, blinking at the unfamiliar comfort surrounding her as if she didn't belong, as if she shouldn't be here. "You're not alone," Madison said quietly. Not now. Not ever, Kate. And that was the day everything began to change. Days turned to weeks. Winter deepened. Their lives slowly began to settle into a strange rhythm. Effie brought warmth. She toddled through the large living space, her little socks gliding across polished wood floors, leaving behind laughter, light, innocent, healing laughter. And in those sounds, Madison felt something thaw within her, something she thought had died along with her brother. Madison began coming home earlier from the office, sometimes surprising herself. She found herself reading bedtime stories to Effie, sitting awkwardly on the floor, trying to imitate cartoon voices, which made Effie laugh so hard she hiccuped. Kate would watch, leaning against the doorway, smiling with that tired, soft smile of hers, the one that seemed to say thank you without words. That smile did something to Madison's heartbeat, something she ignored, something she told herself had nothing to do with what it really was. Late at night, when the house grew quiet, they would find themselves in the kitchen, sharing tea, talking about Matthew. At first, the conversations were stiff, careful. But then they grew. They deepened. They became confessions and whispers. And one night, Kate cried, really cried. Not the kind of tears she shed at the funeral, but tears that broke her open. Tears of guilt, of loneliness, of fear that Effie would never remember her father, that she wasn't enough. Madison, struck, helpless, instinctively reached out. She touched Kate's hand. Just a touch. But it lingered. Not long. Not inappropriate. But long enough that when Kate looked up at her, with red-rimmed eyes and trembling lips, there was something unspoken there. Something that wasn't grief anymore. Something that wasn't pain. Something that felt like connection. Like recognition. Like something neither of them understood, nor dared to name. And just like that, everything changed. Neither of them said a word about it. But from that night, they both became more careful, or less careful. Madison found herself watching Kate more often, memorizing the way she brushed her hair behind her ear, the way she hummed when cooking, the way she looked when she laughed softly at something Effie said. And Kate sometimes looked at Madison as if seeing her for the first time. Not the CEO. Not the billionaire. Not the intimidating woman in sharp suits. But Madison. The sister who loved her brother deeply. The woman who read bedtime stories and walked barefoot in the kitchen at midnight. The woman who had grief etched into her silence, like an old scar. Months passed. Snow came. The world kept turning. There were rumors, of course. Whispers among Madison's business acquaintances, among extended relatives. Questions about why Matthew's widow still lived in his sister's home. But neither Madison nor Kate cared. They had created something inside those glass walls, a quiet world of their own, where healing slowly began to replace grief and where connection began to take a shape neither dared to acknowledge. Not yet, because acknowledging it would make it real.
And real meant dangerous.
Real meant wrong. Real meant love. And love, in this form, felt forbidden. But love didn't care. It was already growing. And they both felt it, even if they didn't say a word. Not yet. Madison Lockwood had always been a woman of order. Schedules, structure, discipline. Her world had always been clean lines and predictable patterns, a life curated like her immaculate office, where not a single paper rested out of place. But ever since Kate and Effie had stepped into her home, that sense of structure had begun to melt, slowly, subtly, like frost under morning sunlight. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in details. In the tiny socks that always seemed to end up on the living room sofa. In the small pink plastic cup on her marble kitchen counter, full of apple juice and sticky fingerprints. In the quiet sound of lullabies being hummed down the hallway at night. And in Kate's presence, the most destabilizing detail of all. Madison would sometimes return home and hear Kate's laugh, soft, not loud, but warm enough to fill an entire room, and something strange would happen inside her chest. A tightness, a flutter, a pulse. Something she didn't want to name. Kate was different from anyone Madison had ever known. She wasn't polished or calculating. She didn't care about power or reputation. She cried openly sometimes, when she thought no one could hear. She paced at night, restless, haunted by memories of Matthew, by fears of raising Effie alone. She cooked dinners in Madison's sleek, steel-and-white kitchen, bringing color and aroma into a place that had once felt too sterile. And sometimes, when Effie was asleep and the house had gone quiet, they would sit together, side by side at the kitchen island, with 2 cups of tea and conversations that started softly. How was your day? Did Effie eat well? And ended in something deeper, something unguarded, something that made Madison's carefully built walls begin to crack. One late evening, near the end of January, snow pressing thick against the windows, Kate stood at the kitchen's sink washing dishes, sleeves rolled up, hair loosely falling down her back in soft waves. Madison walked in after a 14-hour workday, exhausted, shoulders tight from meetings, jaw clenched from negotiations. Yet the moment she saw Kate, just like that in her home, barefoot, humming a lullaby while scrubbing plates, something in her body loosened. Something in her heart quieted. "You don't have to do that," Madison said softly, putting her coat on the back of a chair. Kate turned, smiling gently. "I know, but it keeps me busy. Helps me think." Madison hesitated. "Does it help you feel better?" Kate stopped, water dripping from her hands, her eyes softening. "Some days," she whispered. There was a silence. A different silence now, full of something tentative and fragile. Kate's gaze lingered longer than usual. Madison looked away first. She felt the heat of something unspoken, something dangerous, something she feared and craved at once. That night, after Effie had gone to sleep, Kate knocked lightly on Madison's office door. Madison looked up from her laptop. Kate stood there in pajama pants and a sweater, holding 2 cups of tea. "Couldn't sleep again?" Madison asked gently. Kate nodded, setting a cup beside her. Madison closed her laptop. They talked. Not about business. Not about Matthew. But about fears. About guilt. About beginnings and endings, and memories that hurt too much to hold, but felt too precious to let go of. Madison spoke about her brother for the first time, without anger. About how she resented him for leaving her out of his life when he met Kate. How she felt replaced. How she blamed herself for their distance before his death. Kate listened, gently, deeply. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she said, "He talked about you all the time, you know." Madison blinked, stunned. Kate continued, "He loved you so much. He didn't know how to fix things between you two. He kept saying he'd wait for the right moment." Madison felt tears before she even realized she was crying. Not sobbing. Not breaking. Just soft tears falling, quietly, on her hands. Kate reached out without thinking. She covered Madison's hand with hers.
Warm.
Gentle.
Steady.
The world stopped moving. Madison didn't pull away. Neither did Kate. And that silence, that delicate, intimate silence, felt like the most dangerous silence of all. Over the next few weeks, that connection grew. Unintentionally. Unspoken. But undeniably. It lived in the way Kate lingered in doorways when Madison entered a room. In the way Madison found excuses to join Kate and Effie on their evening walks, watching Effie splash in puddles with pink boots as Kate laughed freely beside her. In the way their hands brushed when they both reached for the same dish, the same book, the same door. And every time it happened, the touch lasted just a fraction too long.
A pause.
A breath. A silent question. One night in early February, the house was dark except for a soft lamplight in the living room. Kate sat curled on the sofa, holding a photograph in her hand, Matthew holding baby Effie, smiling, looking alive. Love what you've seen so far and want to help me keep creating these awesome stories on this channel? Then subscribe and hit the bell. Your subscription supports the channel and makes sure you get more exciting stories. Madison approached quietly, sitting beside her. "I'm scared," Kate said, voice shaky. "I'm scared I'll forget how his voice sounded. I'm scared Effie will never remember him at all." Madison didn't think. She just moved. She reached out and pulled Kate into her arms, gently, protectively.
Kate didn't resist.
She leaned into her, resting her head against Madison's shoulder, tears soaking into her shirt. Madison's heart pounded. Not with grief, not with fear, but with something painfully fragile. Something that felt like comfort, like belonging, like longing. She held Kate longer than she should have. She knew that, but she didn't let go. Not until Kate exhaled, softly, shakily, and whispered, "Madison, I don't feel alone when I'm with you." Those words burned. They ignited something inside her that she'd been desperately trying to bury. And suddenly, Madison knew. She knew she was crossing a line. She knew that with every touch, every late-night talk, every shared laugh and lingering silence, she was stepping closer to something she could never undo. But she also knew, deeply, terrifyingly, that she didn't want to stop. That night, as she lay in bed, in her silent room overlooking the sleeping city, she thought of Kate, of her soft voice, of the way she said Madison's name like it meant something, like it mattered. And she realized, with a kind of clarity that felt both beautiful and cruel, that she had never felt this way about anyone before. No business partner, no lover, not even with the women she'd briefly dated in secret, relationships that had never gone deeper than surfaces and social events. This felt different. This felt like a fault line waiting to break open. And she was standing right on it. The next morning, as sunlight spilled gently across the kitchen floor, Madison found Kate there early, pouring cereal for Effie, wearing one of Madison's sweaters because she'd forgotten her own in the laundry. Madison stopped in the doorway. Just watched. Kate's hair was messy, her smile soft as Effie babbled happily to her stuffed rabbit. She looked domestic, peaceful, a picture of a life Madison didn't even know she secretly wanted until now. Kate looked up. Their eyes met, and they both froze, just for a moment, because something in that gaze felt irrevocably changed. Not family, not obligation,
Not duty.
something else, something dangerous, something real. And this time, neither of them pretended not to see it. Madison noticed it first in the smallest, most insignificant moments, the kind that never used to matter, but now did, intensely. It was in the way Kate's hand would brush against hers when passing a dish across the table, and neither of them would move away immediately. It was in how Kate would hesitate before leaving the room when Madison entered, as if waiting, silently asking with her eyes, "Are you going to leave too?" It was in how Madison would sometimes forget her phone, her meetings, her email, forget the world entirely, just to stand in the doorway for one more second, watching Kate braid Effie's hair, humming softly, her expression calm and tender. There was a warmth in this house now, slow-burning, fragile, yet undeniably alive. And Madison, who used to believe warmth had no place in her life, now couldn't imagine the house without it. It was late February when the first undeniable shift happened. Effie had fallen asleep early after a day at the park, and the house was quiet. Madison was reading in the living room when she noticed Kate standing by the hallway, hesitating. She wore a cream-colored cardigan over soft gray pajama pants, her hair falling loosely over her shoulders. She looked uncertain, vulnerable, like she wasn't entirely sure why she had stopped walking. Madison stood. "Can't sleep?" Kate shook her head. Her voice trailed off. She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with a thin silver ring she still wore on her right hand, Matthew's wedding ring that she had moved from her left to her right finger after the funeral. Madison's eyes softened when she saw it.
Kate took a breath.
"I was going to make tea."
She paused.
Then looked at Madison again. Held the gaze this time. "I didn't want to be alone." It was the first time she admitted it so directly. Madison's heartbeat tripped. She nodded gently. "You don't have to be," she said quietly. They ended up in the dimly lit kitchen, sitting at the island, tea steaming between them. At first, they spoke softly, about Effie, about the weather, about nothing that mattered. But then Kate said suddenly, "I feel guilty when I laugh." Madison looked up, startled. Kate continued, eyes wet, voice trembling. "Some days, Effie makes me laugh. Or something makes me smile. And then I feel horrible. Like I'm forgetting him. Like I'm moving on too soon. Like I shouldn't." Madison reached across the counter, Without hesitation, she took Kate's hand.
Gently.
Warmly.
Firmly.
Laughing doesn't mean forgetting, she whispered. It means surviving. Kate looked at their hands. She didn't pull away. Madison felt her pulse, quick and shallow, but she didn't move either. Kate slowly lifted her eyes. And for the first time, there was no confusion in them. No uncertainty. Only something soft. Something raw. Something that looked a lot like wanting. A silence fell. But not the kind they had known before. This one was thick with meaning.
Charged.
Electric. Fragile. And then, without quite knowing how, they were closer. Kate had moved without thinking, or maybe Madison had. Their hands were no longer just touching but holding. Not gently. Not in passing. But truly holding. And their bodies were angled toward each other, knees touching lightly under the table. Madison could feel Kate's breath now, soft, unsteady. Kate spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Sometimes I feel like myself again when I'm with you. And that scares me. Madison's throat tightened. Why does it scare you? Kate's eyes glistened. Because I don't know if it's wrong to feel safe with you. And there it was. Finally spoken. Hanging between them like a fragile, dangerous thread. Madison's heartbeat was erratic now. A hot ache burned in her chest. She wanted to say something. Anything. She wanted to tell Kate that nothing about this was wrong. That she had started to feel things too. Deep, unnamed things that left her awake at night, staring at her ceiling, wondering how something that felt so gentle, so healing, could also be so terrifying. But all she could manage was, "You're allowed to feel safe, Katie." The nickname slipped out unconsciously, softly, like something she had been holding for a long time and had forgotten was even there. Kate looked stunned. No one called her Katie. Not since Matthew. It was his name for her. Hearing Madison say it felt intimate, special, devastatingly tender. And that was the moment something in Kate finally broke, not in pain, but in surrender. She blinked, tears falling silently, and whispered, "Madison," but she didn't back away.
She didn't pull her hand back.
In fact, she held tighter. And Madison didn't let go. The next days were full of quiet shifts. Not obvious. Not dramatic. But real. When they walked together, their hands brushed more often. When they sat beside each other at dinner, their knees stayed pressed together beneath the table, and neither of them moved away. When their eyes met across the room, they didn't look away anymore. They didn't pretend not to notice. Meanwhile, in private, Madison battled her guilt. Every time she felt warmth toward Kate, guilt rose like a cold, dark wave, hissing that this was betrayal. That this was wrong. That Matthew would never forgive her. But then she would see Kate feeding Effie breakfast in their kitchen, sunlight warming her hair into soft gold, and she would feel something else. Something purer than guilt. Something deeper than fear. Something that looked unmistakably like love. One evening, Kate fell asleep on the couch after putting Effie to bed, exhaustion from months of grieving finally catching up to her. Madison walked in and stopped. Kate was curled up, breathing softly, one hand resting near her cheek, her face peaceful for the first time in weeks. Something inside Madison melted. She stepped forward, slowly, carefully, and gently draped a blanket over Kate's shoulders. And without meaning to, without planning to, she reached down and brushed a stray strand of hair away from Kate's forehead. Her fingertips lingered, ever so softly. Kate stirred slightly, not waking, but leaning, instinctively, into Madison's touch. Madison froze. And in that moment she knew it, with painful, blinding clarity. She was in love with her brother's widow, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. But it did not feel wrong. It did not feel dirty. It did not feel like betrayal. It felt like something faded. Something unexpected and deeply, profoundly healing. And that terrified her more than anything. That night, Madison couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing Kate's soft breathing echo in her memory, feeling the warmth of her skin against her fingers. She knew things had changed now. And soon, life outside these walls would start to intrude. Soon, someone would notice. Someone would ask questions. And she knew exactly who it would be. Her mother, Gloria Lockwood, the elegant, fearsome woman who believed in duty, legacy, and reputation above all else. The woman who adored Matthew, who blamed Madison for his emotional distance in his last year. The woman who had never fully accepted Kate, believing Matthew should have married someone more Lockwood. She would come. She would ask questions. And she would never accept, never forgive, what was slowly growing in this house. The calm before the storm was ending. The world was going to knock very soon. And when it did, everything would change. Madison had always believed she could prepare for anything: hostile takeovers, aggressive mergers, boardroom interrogations, but nothing in her life had prepared her for the moment she heard her mother's voice echo through the vast marble foyer of her home on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Madison? Gloria Lockwood's voice was sharp, poised, commanding, like a perfectly maintained piano note that never fell out of tune. Madison froze in the kitchen, a dish towel in her hand, while Effie sat at the island, drawing messy flowers with crayons. Kate stood beside her, slicing strawberries, her hair loosely tied back, wearing a soft cream sweater that made her look heartbreakingly peaceful. That peace evaporated the moment Gloria stepped inside. Tall, composed, with expensive heels clicking sharply against the floor, she entered like she owned the place, which, in some ways, she believed she did. Her presence altered the atmosphere. The warmth seemed to retreat, the air tightening with expectation. Gloria's gaze swept across the foyer, pausing when she saw Kate in the kitchen. Her expression flickered, just slightly, with that polite smile she used when speaking to someone she didn't entirely approve of, but had to tolerate. Catherine. Kate straightened instinctively. Mrs. Lockwood. Gloria's eyes moved past her toward Effie, sitting quietly on her stool, unaware of the tension building around her. Gloria's expression softened genuinely then, in a way it never did for adults. She approached slowly, bending to Effie's level. "My sweet girl," she said softly, brushing a curl from Effie's forehead. Effie looked up, blinked, then smiled. "Grandma," she said brightly, her little voice like sunshine breaking through clouds. Gloria smiled, truly though briefly. She lifted Effie into her arms, holding her close. "How are you, darling?" Effie held up her drawing. "Flowers." Gloria admired it delicately, nodding as if she were examining fine art. But then her gaze lifted. Toward Madison. Toward Kate. And she noticed. She noticed the details others might have missed. The way Kate stood slightly too close to Madison. The way Madison's eyes followed Kate instinctively. The way the house, once cold and precise, now held signs of domestic life. A pink blanket draped on the couch. A stuffed rabbit lounging on the staircase. A pair of tiny shoes beside Madison's polished black ones. Gloria's lips tightened. She set Effie down gently, and with a controlled smile, said, "Madison, dear, may I speak with you?" Kate felt it. The air shift. The unspoken warning. She softly picked up Effie and whispered, "Let's go draw in the playroom, okay?" Effie nodded happily, unaware, and followed Kate upstairs. Madison knew what was coming. She followed Gloria to the sitting room, where her mother stood tall, back straight, arms folded elegantly, like a queen who had just discovered her heir was disobeying her law. "You didn't tell me Catherine was still staying here," Gloria said calmly, though there was an edge beneath her words. Madison kept her voice even. "She's family." Gloria's eyes narrowed. "In-law family." Temporarily. Madison stiffened. "She lost her husband. My brother. She has a child. I'm helping her." "Helping her," Gloria repeated, as if tasting the words. "Is that what you call it?" Madison's jaw clenched. "What are you implying?" Gloria stepped closer. "You're seen with her everywhere. The charity gala. The winter benefit. And now you leave the office early, almost every night, to return home. So." Madison's voice was low, defensive. "I own the company. I can choose when to leave." Gloria didn't flinch. It isn't about your company. It's about appearances. It's about legacy. It's about the Lockwood name. That name. That damn name. Madison felt anger rise. Matthew is gone, she said through gritted teeth. And I am the Lockwood legacy now. Gloria's gaze was piercing. Then act like it. The words sliced. Madison took a breath. Silent fire flickered in her eyes. This house is not a boardroom, she said softly, voice dangerously calm. You do not dictate what happens here. No. Gloria asked quietly, tilting her head. Then perhaps you can explain to me why you look at Catherine the way you used to look at your brother. As though she is the only link left keeping you from falling apart. The words hit like cold water.
Hard.
Brutal. She froze. Silence thickened. Gloria saw it. She saw everything. Her voice softened. Just slightly. Madison, she said quietly, I know you. You have always been stoic, loyal, fiercely protective of those you love. And I know grief makes us cling to what feels safe. But be careful. People are beginning to talk. Madison's throat tightened. There is nothing. Don't lie to me, Gloria breathed.
Not angry.
Not loud, but deeply disappointed. Somehow, that hurt more. And then, almost gently, she added, it would destroy your father to know you were risking everything. And for her. Her.
Kate.
Not by name. Not as family. But as problem. Suddenly, the guilt that Madison had been keeping at bay flooded through her like ice water. Betrayal.
Shame. Wrong.
Her brother's wife. Her mother's words echoed. It would destroy your father. It would disgrace the family. It would shame the Lockwood legacy. She felt her heartbeat in her ears. Faster. Louder. One truth came sharply into focus. If this ever became real, if she ever admitted what was happening between her and Kate, the world would tear it apart. They would crucify them. They would not see love. They would see betrayal. They would not forgive. And worst of all, her mother might never speak to her again. When Kate came back downstairs, she found Madison standing alone in the hallway, motionless, staring at nothing. Is everything okay? Kate asked softly. Madison heard the kindness in Kate's voice, the comfort, the warmth, and it hurt now because she finally understood the risk of allowing herself to feel it. She turned slowly. Her eyes were distant, stormy, conflicted. Kate stepped closer, worried. What happened? Madison opened her mouth to speak. But what came out wasn't what she expected. In a voice quiet and raw and almost broken, she whispered, My mother knows. Kate froze. Everything changed. And upstairs, unaware, Effie began softly singing to herself, tiny, innocent, warm. The last flicker of peace before the storm. Madison had never felt her house so painfully quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. This one felt brittle, stretched thin, like silence that could shatter at the slightest sound. Since Gloria's visit, the warmth that had slowly grown in the house had gone into hiding, replaced by something tight and uncertain. Madison had begun to change, in ways that were subtle to everyone but Kate.
She spoke less.
Stayed later at the office. Stopped lingering in the kitchen at night when Kate made tea. Stopped sitting close enough that their knees would touch beneath the table. Stopped brushing her hand against Kate's when they passed each other in the hallway. She built distance. Deliberate, quiet, aching distance. Because she was afraid. Afraid of what it meant that her mother had looked at her. Not with anger, but with knowing. Afraid of what it meant that, deep down, she didn't feel wrong about loving Kate. Not immoral. Not disgraceful. Just terrifyingly exposed. Madison began avoiding moments she couldn't control. She no longer walked Effie to bed at night. She skipped family breakfast. And when Kate tried to talk, she always found a reason to escape. Email, meeting, phone call, anything. Until one night in early March. The house was dark, except for the soft glow of the kitchen lamp. Kate stood by the counter. 2 cups of tea waiting. She had been there for an hour, waiting, hoping. When Madison entered, she paused, surprised to see Kate still awake. Kate didn't smile.
She didn't speak.
She simply studied Madison's face. Madison tensed. It's late, she said softly, stepping past her. You should sleep. Kate didn't move. Didn't blink. You're avoiding me, she whispered. Madison inhaled sharply, pausing. I've been busy. No, Kate said, voice trembling. You've been gone. Silence. Heavy. Unbearable. Madison kept her back turned, staring at nothing. It's better this way, Madison said finally, voice low. Kate stepped forward, heart pounding. Better for who? Madison closed her eyes. That was the question she had been running from. For who? For her mother, who clung to the Lockwood reputation like armor against grief. For her father, who still pretended Madison could fix everything their family had lost. For Matthew, whose memory was becoming more like a ghost haunting every decision she made. Or was she doing it for herself? Because she was afraid of how deeply she wanted this. How deeply she wanted Kate. Kate stood closer now, fragile but unbroken. You're pushing me away because of her, she whispered. Because she doesn't approve. Madison said nothing. But her silence was its own admission. And that hurt Kate more than words could have. Do you think I haven't heard the whispers? Kate continued, pain lacing her voice. That it's inappropriate for me to be here? That I'm too dependent on you? That I'm taking advantage of your kindness? Madison flinched. Kate's voice broke. Or worse, that you feel something for me that you shouldn't? Madison turned then. Fast. Eyes wide. But Kate didn't back away. She stepped closer, eyes glossy, voice soft but unwavering. Do you? Madison opened her mouth. But no words came out. Because she didn't know how to answer. Because there was no safe answer. Because anything she said would either break her or break Kate. Kate searched her eyes. And then she said the one thing Madison wasn't ready to face. Madison, she whispered, voice fragile. Are you ashamed of me? Those 6 words hit like a physical blow. Madison looked stunned, horrified, almost breathless. No, she said instantly. God, Kate, no. Kate swallowed. Then why do you look at me differently now? Madison shook her head slowly, steps unsteady, almost backing away. Because if I let this continue, her voice faltered. If I let us continue, everything I've built will fall apart. Kate's expression changed. Not angry, not pleading, just heartbreakingly clear. Everything you've built, she repeated quietly. And what about everything we've built? Does that matter less? Madison froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Kate took a small step backward, as if realizing something. Something painful. Maybe, she whispered, voice trembling, you don't actually believe what you're feeling is real. Maybe you think it's just because we're grieving. 2 lonely people clinging to each other. She wasn't accusing. She wasn't cruel. She was hurting. And that made it worse. Madison shook her head, agonized, torn between truth and fear. I don't know what I feel, she whispered. I don't know what's real, or what's guilt, or what's love. Kate said quietly. Silence. Madison looked like she had been struck. She didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it. And that was worse. Kate's eyes shimmered. You know what hurts the most? She asked softly. Madison was silent. Kate swallowed. I finally feel alive when I'm with you. After losing everything, that feeling means something. Something real. And I think you feel it too. But you're too scared to reach for it. A tear slipped down Madison's cheek. Her voice broke. I am scared, Kate, she whispered. Because if I choose this, if I choose you, I might lose everything else. Then, softly, painfully, Kate whispered, then maybe you never had it at all. The words hung there, delicate and devastating. Madison stood frozen, haunted, not by guilt now, but by the truth she had been avoiding. She looked at Kate, at the woman who had become home without ever meaning to, the woman who carried both pain and hope in her eyes, the woman who loved Effie, the woman who made the silence feel safe, the woman who made her feel like Madison, not just the Lockwood CEO. And she said nothing. Because everything she could say would either build or destroy everything at once. Kate didn't cry loudly. She just nodded, softly, swallowing her pain with dignity. "Good night, Madison," she whispered. And this time, when she walked away, Madison didn't stop her. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't move. Effie, half awake, heard voices and walked to the stairs, clutching her stuffed rabbit. From the top of the steps, she looked down at Madison standing alone. Something in the little girl's face changed. She understood, in the way children understand pain without knowing why, that something in this house had broken. And for the first time since she came to live here, Effie asked her bedtime question not to Kate, but to Madison. "Will you stay?" she whispered. Madison looked up, eyes filled, heart cracking open. She didn't answer, and that silence felt like heartbreak itself. Madison had always prided herself on emotional control, but the days following that painful conversation with Kate proved differently. The distance she had attempted to create didn't feel safe or responsible. It felt like suffocation. The house, once full of quiet warmth, now felt like a stranger's mansion. Large, elegant, cold. Kate no longer lingered in the hallways. She no longer made tea for two. She walked past Madison politely, with a soft good morning or good night, but without staying long enough to meet her gaze. She still lived here, but emotionally, she had retreated somewhere distant, somewhere where Madison could no longer reach her. And that, Madison realized, hurt more than anything. More than her mother's judgment. More than society's whispers. More than the guilt she carried. Effie, too, noticed. Children may not understand complexity, but they feel shifts in the air, in the way adults speak softer than before, in the way hugs linger shorter, in the way smiles disappear faster. Effie stopped smiling as much. She stopped leaving her toys scattered across the living room. She stopped babbling morning songs. She watched Madison often, with her big innocent eyes, searching, silently asking questions she couldn't put into words. That hurt most of all. One Friday evening, Madison arrived home early, unexpectedly. She didn't go to her study like she normally did. She didn't retreat. She walked past the glass staircase and into the living room, drawn by the soft sound of Effie's voice. Kate sat on the floor, sorting laundry, folding little shirts and tiny pastel socks. Effie sat near her, half distractedly stacking wooden blocks, though her mind clearly wasn't in it. When she saw Madison enter, she paused. Then did something she normally didn't. She stood, slowly, cautiously, clutching her stuffed rabbit, and walked toward Madison like someone testing uncertain ground. Madison knelt, smiling softly. "Hey, Bug," she whispered, brushing a curl from Effie's forehead. "Long day." Effie hesitated, then nodded, her little brows furrowing like she was thinking very hard. Madison sat cross-legged on the floor, so they were eye-level. She expected Effie to ask about drawing or dinner or cartoons, something normal. But instead, Effie looked at her, and with the full sincerity only a child could have, asked, "Are you sad?" Madison froze. Kate looked up from folding laundry, surprised, watching them. Madison's throat tightened. "Maybe a little," she said softly. Effie blinked, evaluating that answer carefully. Then she turned, looked at Kate for a moment, looked back at Madison. Silence fell, the kind that felt heavy, like the moment before something changes forever. And then Effie stepped closer. She stood right in front of Madison, small and brave and heartbreakingly sincere, and gently placed her little hand on Madison's cheek. And with a voice innocent, soft, and utterly pure, she whispered, "It's okay, Mommy." The word landed like a heartbeat, like thunder, like a promise. Mommy, not Auntie, not Maddie. Mommy. The room stopped breathing. Madison's eyes widened, glassy with shock, then emotion. Kate gasped, hand covering her mouth, tears immediately pooling in her eyes, not because the moment was wrong, but because it was right, heartbreakingly, undeniably right. Effie didn't understand the earthquake she had caused. She simply did what children do, speak truth without fear. Madison's hands shook as she touched Effie's face, tears now blurring her vision. Did you just call me mommy? Effie nodded innocently. You feel like mommy. There it was. The truth. The one thing Madison had been desperately trying not to admit, that in this house, in this fragile, beautiful, emotionally complicated place, she wasn't just a CEO trying to protect a widow and child. She had become something more, something deeper, something real. Tears finally escaped Madison's eyes, falling freely, unhidden. She pulled Effie into her arms, holding her tight, like someone clinging to the last piece of something sacred. I love you, Effie, she whispered, for the first time. Effie smiled, resting her head on Madison's shoulder, peacefully, like she knew, like she had always known. Kate watched, still sitting on the floor, eyes full of wonder and heartbreak and something breathtakingly vulnerable. Because this moment, this innocent, pure, unexpected moment, had broken the barrier they had both been trying so hard to keep intact. It wasn't betrayal. It wasn't wrong. It wasn't shameful. It was the love.
Real.
Unfiltered.
Alive.
Madison gently carried Effie to Kate, kneeling beside her on the floor, tears still streaking her face. Effie sat contentedly between them, humming softly. Madison looked at Kate, truly looked, and there was no distance in her eyes anymore. No fear. Only raw truth. Only love. Only surrender. Kate tried to speak, but her voice broke. Madison. Madison reached out, slowly, hesitantly, and placed her hand over Kate's. And this time, Kate didn't pull away. Madison whispered, voice trembling. I'm scared, Katie. But I don't want to run anymore. Kate's eyes filled instantly. Then don't, she whispered. Effie, still between them, looked up at both of them, confused at the tears but sensing something beautiful was happening. She reached her tiny hands out, one on Madison's cheek, one on Kate's. And just like that, in one quiet, unremarkable room, without fanfare or certainty or permission from the world outside, something sacred began. Not declared, not labeled, but undeniably there. That night, Madison lay awake, not from fear, but from clarity. Effie had spoken the truth. She was not just protecting Kate. She was loving her. And maybe, just maybe, love didn't always begin with certainty. Sometimes it began with a little girl quietly saying, Mommy. Madison didn't sleep that night. Not because she was restless, but because she felt something had shifted, something that could never go back to how it was before. Effie's innocent voice, calling her Mommy, had pierced through every layer of guilt, fear, and denial she had built around herself. She lay awake, not haunted, but softened. Not ashamed, but scared in a different way. Scared because love had arrived quietly and fully, without her permission, and now it was here, breathing softly in the room next door, in the form of a little girl who believed, without question, that she had two mothers. The next morning, the house felt different. Warmer. Not because anything grand had changed, but because everything had. Effie held Madison's hand more naturally now, like she had always done it. She sat in her lap during breakfast, drawing her messy little sons and telling Madison proudly, I made this for my two mommies. The words stabbed gently at first, but then it warmed like fire across her entire chest. Kate watched quietly across the table. Her expression was unreadable at first, full of tenderness and hesitation and something deeply aching, but not broken this time. For the first time in days, she didn't avoid Madison's gaze. She held it, and without saying a word, something passed silently between them. Later that evening, when Effie was asleep, the house fell into its late-night hush, lamps glowing softly, rain tapping at the windows, silence comfortable now instead of heavy. Madison stood in front of the living room fireplace, staring at the flickering light, when Kate entered, barefoot, wearing a loose cream sweater and dark leggings, her hair brushed out and falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She stopped a few feet away. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kate walked slowly, hesitantly, until she was standing near the opposite side of the fireplace, facing Madison, but with a little space still between them. Not too far. Not too close. Safe, but not distant. Madison turned slowly to face her. There was no pretense now. No emotional hiding. Kate took a breath, eyes soft, voice quiet but steady. She called you Mommy. Madison nodded slowly, eyes glistening. I didn't expect it. Kate swallowed, her voice trembling as she spoke. Did it feel wrong? Madison's answer came instantly. No, she said, voice thick, tears now forming. No, it felt right. It felt terrifying, but right. Kate's eyes softened. She stepped slightly closer. You're good with her, she whispered. Better than you think. Better than you let yourself believe. Madison let out a shaky breath. I don't know how to be a mother. Neither do I, Kate whispered back. But Effie doesn't care about perfection. She cares about presence. Presence. The kind of presence Madison had offered without realizing. The kind of presence that meant reading bedtime stories, kissing scraped knees, and sitting through tantrums, not as a duty, but as someone who loved her. They stood there, in that soft flickering light, surrounded by the quiet acceptance of something too delicate to name. Kate, Madison began, voice trembling. I'm still scared. Kate nodded gently. I know. It's not just the world, Madison continued, voice breaking. It's my guilt. Matthew, Madison, Kate said softly, stepping closer. We both loved him. In different ways. But love doesn't end when someone dies. It changes form. It finds new homes in the people who are left. Her voice trembled, but she was steady. And he would want Effie loved.
Deeply.
Fully. No matter who it was by. Madison swallowed hard, tears now falling. But would he forgive me for... She couldn't finish. Kate stepped closer. Close enough now that Madison could see the soft freckles across her cheeks, the way her lashes were wet with tears she wasn't letting fall. She reached out, slowly, like asking permission, and gently took Madison's hand. Madison didn't pull away. Kate's touch was soft, steady, warm. This, Kate whispered, not letting go, is not betrayal. This is healing. Silence. Deep and fragile. Their fingers intertwined slowly, naturally, as if they had been doing it all along, without realizing. And for the first time, Madison didn't feel like she was stealing something. She felt like she was giving something back, to herself, to Kate, to Effie, to life. Kate stepped closer again, now fully in front of her. She didn't lean in. She didn't rush. Instead, she gently lifted her hand and rested it softly against Madison's cheek. Madison inhaled sharply, her heart beating wildly. Not with fear this time, but with something tender, reverent. Kate's thumb gently brushed the corner of Madison's eye, catching a tear. You don't have to hide anymore, she whispered. And in that moment, Madison felt something shift permanently inside her. She reached up, covering Kate's hand with her own, pressing it to her face like something sacred. Their foreheads almost touched but didn't. Their breaths mingled, but they didn't cross that line.
Not yet.
Not with a kiss, but with something deeper, quieter, infinitely more intimate. Presence.
Trust.
Surrender. Kate stepped just an inch closer. Their bodies nearly touching. Their hearts already there. Someday, Kate whispered, we won't be afraid of this. Madison nodded softly, holding her hand, tears falling freely. Someday, she whispered, I'll be ready to say it out loud. They didn't kiss. But sometimes, what happens before a kiss holds more power than the kiss itself. And that night, standing barefoot before a quiet fire, holding hands like something holy, Kate and Madison began. Truly, quietly, irrevocably. They fell asleep that night on the same couch, not holding each other, but close enough that their shoulders touched. Close enough for warmth. Close enough for hope. Not lovers yet, but no longer just family. Something new now. Something real. Something waiting. In the doorway, unnoticed, Effie stood for a moment, sleepy-eyed, hugging her rabbit. She looked at them on the couch, almost smiling, and whispered, as if confirming something she had always known. Two mommies. And then she padded quietly upstairs. Madison had never realized how much a house could feel alive until she began noticing the way silence changed depending on who was in it. Before Kate and Effie, her home had been quiet in a controlled way, calculated, elegant, efficient. Now the silence felt warm, lived in, shaped by faint traces of laughter, stuffed animals left on chairs, and the scent of vanilla shampoo from upstairs after Effie's bath time. And lately, the silence also held something new, something that lived between her and Kate, something that didn't need to be named to be felt. Some evenings it felt like gravity, pulling them toward each other in the kitchen when everyone else had gone to sleep. On others, it felt like restraint, an invisible thread they both knew was there but were afraid to pull. But it was real. It was undeniably, quietly real. They didn't talk about feelings, but they didn't hide from them anymore either. Their shared moments weren't accidental anymore. They were intentional, chosen. On a chilly Sunday morning, while snow sat quietly along the garden walls, Madison stood at the kitchen counter making coffee for herself and tea for Kate, without Kate asking for it. She just did it, automatically, like a ritual. When Kate entered, tying her hair into a casual bun, Madison slid the mug across the counter silently. Kate smiled at it, not surprised, not questioning, just accepting. That felt deeper than words. Effie sat on a stool with her crayons, coloring little hearts and round faces, telling them both, without hesitation, that she was drawing my two mommies. Madison and Kate froze, just for a second, hearts tripping, but neither corrected her. No one laughed. No one dismissed it. And that silence, that quiet, unspoken acceptance, felt like a beginning, not a mistake. Something was growing, not rushed, not declared, but undeniably alive. And then one evening, something changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't planned. It was something simple, and precisely because it was simple, it felt monumental. Kate entered Madison's study late at night, barefoot, wearing a soft gray sweater and holding a folded blanket in her hands. "You fell asleep on the sofa last night," she said gently. "I thought you might want this." Madison smiled, small but real, pushing aside her laptop as Kate stepped closer. "Stay a minute?" Madison asked, surprising even herself with how soft her voice sounded. Kate hesitated, then sat, not on the chair across from Madison, but beside her on the deep leather sofa. Close. Warm. Quiet. They talked, not about grief, not about fear, not about Gloria, but about Effie's new favorite cereal, about the business gala next month, about how Madison never had any plants because she would absolutely forget to water them. When Kate laughed, it wasn't the polite laughter from before. It was gentle, real, warm. Something about the sound made Madison's heart ache in a beautiful way. She watched Kate, her soft freckles, the tiny wrinkle at the bridge of her nose when she smiled, the way her hair fell gently around her face, and for the first time, Madison touched her intentionally. Not by accident, not by circumstance,
but by choice.
She reached out slowly and tucked a loose strand of hair behind Kate's ear. The moment froze. Kate inhaled sharply, but didn't pull away. Her eyes searched Madison's, soft and open and beautifully vulnerable. And Madison felt it again, that painful, powerful, beautiful truth. She wanted to love this woman.
She already did.
Kate didn't speak. She didn't move. But her hand, her trembling, brave, beautiful hand, lifted slowly and rested gently on Madison's wrist. Not holding, not pulling her closer, just telling her without words, "I feel this too." And then they sat like that, for a long time, just breathing, just silently admitting something without daring to say it. The moment ended not because either of them pulled away, but because footsteps approached. Gloria's voice. Sharp, controlled, metallic. "I see," she said quietly from the doorway. Neither had heard her enter. The spell broke. Kate's hand pulled away slowly. She didn't rip it away in guilt or fear, but she withdrew. Calmly, respectfully, protectively. Not for herself, but for Madison. Madison's jaw clenched. She stood, tall, composed, ready to face her mother. Gloria looked at them, Not with hatred, but with cold understanding. And that was somehow worse. Grief makes people bond unnaturally, she began, her voice like fine glass. It makes emotional boundaries blurry. Kate lowered her gaze. Quiet not from shame, but because she refused to dignify the accusation with argument. Madison, however, did not lower hers. This isn't about grief, Madison said quietly. Gloria's gaze sharpened. Then what is it, Madison? Silence. Long, heavy. Kate didn't answer. Because this wasn't hers to answer. This was Madison's moment. Madison didn't speak. But she didn't look away either. And that silence, that unwavering silence, said everything. Gloria's eyes flashed. Not confusion. Not shock. Something far more dangerous, recognition. So it's true, Gloria whispered. Not a question. A verdict. She turned to Kate then, not cruelly but clinically. You should know, she said, that if you love Madison, truly love her, the world will not forgive you easily. And neither will this family. Kate met her eyes.
Calm, sad, brave.
I don't want the world, she said softly. I just want a life that feels like it's mine. Gloria truly looked at her then. Not as the widow. Not as the outsider. But as someone her daughter might love. And for just a moment, just a flicker, uncertainty passed over her face. Then she left. And the silence that followed was the loudest either had ever heard. Kate stood slowly, heart racing, but before she could walk away, Madison reached for her hand again.
Gently, purposefully.
This time, Kate didn't hesitate. She turned, and Madison whispered, not an apology, not an explanation, but truth.
Quiet, real,
unstoppable. I feel something for you that doesn't scare me anymore. Kate's breath caught, not because she expected a confession, but because she knew, now, for the first time, that Madison would not run anymore. She might still struggle. She might still hurt. They might still face judgment, whispers, loneliness. But love, real love, had begun to outrun the fear. That night, they did not kiss, but they sat together, hands linked, heads leaning gently against each other, silent,
joined,
healing. Not over Matthew. Not yet. Maybe never fully. But they were healing together. And that made all the difference. Madison had never been more aware of her heartbeat than in the days that followed. It was as if her own body had finally admitted something her mind had been trying desperately to control for months. The tension between them had changed. It no longer felt forbidden. It felt inevitable. Not loud or dramatic, but quiet and intentional, woven into everyday moments like invisible threads guiding them closer. There was no declaration, no confession, and yet everything felt said. One evening, when the rain tapped gently against the wide glass windows, Madison returned from work earlier than usual. She found Kate in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor, building towers with Effie using colorful blocks. Effie squealed with delight whenever the tower collapsed, and Kate laughed, a real, full laugh that lit up her entire face. Madison stood at the doorway watching, something in her chest softening so deeply she felt it in her bones. Her love for this scene, this ordinary, beautiful, domestic scene, was so intense it almost frightened her. Kate looked up, sensing her presence before she saw her, and smiled, warm and quiet. Madison didn't speak. She just walked over and sat beside them, taking off her blazer, her expression softer than she realized. Effie immediately climbed into her lap, showing her a crooked little house she had built, and Madison listened carefully, admiring it like it was architectural genius. Kate watched the two of them, something soft and wounded and hopeful flickering in her eyes, as if she were allowing herself to imagine something she still didn't dare say out loud. When Effie finally tired and went upstairs for her bath, the house seemed to exhale. Madison remained on the floor, leaning back against the sofa, and Kate stayed beside her, sitting close but not too close, as if closeness was no longer an accident, but a choice waited for. The silence was comforting now, familiar, pulsing with something new. Kate glanced at her, then down at her own hands, then back at her, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You came home early," she said softly. Madison nodded, her voice steady but warm. "I wanted to." Kate didn't reply, but she didn't have to. The warmth in her eyes said everything. They didn't talk about love. They didn't talk about what they were becoming. They simply allowed themselves to exist in it. The next morning, sunlight poured into the kitchen, painting everything in soft gold. Kate was making pancakes, her hair in a loose braid over her shoulder, humming quietly. Madison entered, barefoot, still in her soft sleep clothes, hair loose and unguarded. She leaned against the counter and just looked at Kate, with a softness that felt like confession. Kate noticed. Her cheeks flushed slightly, and she pretended to focus on the skillet, but her smile gave her away. "You're staring," she said softly. Madison didn't deny it. "I know." Kate swallowed, feeling warmth spread through her chest, so new and so familiar at the same time. Effie patted in, wearing a blanket as a cape, her curls bouncing, and she took Madison's hand immediately, pulling her toward the kitchen table. "Come, Mommy, we're having heart pancakes." The word that had once felt dangerous now felt natural. Madison smiled, kissed the top of Effie's head, then looked up at Kate. Kate held her gaze, her expression caught between longing and something deeper, something like peace. Breakfast was warm and messy and full of laughter, and something about it felt like a glimpse into a future neither had confessed to wanting, but both desperately and quietly hoped for. Later that evening, after Effie fell asleep early from an afternoon of playing, Madison found Kate sitting alone in the reading nook by the large window overlooking the garden. A blanket over her legs, a book open but not being read, her expression thoughtful and serene. Madison approached quietly, heart thudding, but not with panic this time, but with certainty. Kate didn't look up immediately, but she felt her presence, and her breath caught just slightly, betraying everything that remained unspoken. "I didn't hear you come in," Kate said softly. Madison didn't sit across from her. She sat beside her.
Close.
Deliberately close. Their shoulders brushed, and neither pulled away. They didn't speak for a moment. They just watched the fading sunlight turn the windows to amber. It was peaceful.
Whole. Real.
"We're not broken people," Madison said quietly, as if suddenly needing to say it out loud. "We're just people learning how to carry loss and love at the same time." Kate turned to look at her, stunned by the truth of it. "Yes," she whispered, eyes burning softly. "Yes." Madison reached out, not quite touching, but near enough that Kate felt the warmth of her hand. Kate didn't wait this time. She took it. Their fingers intertwined slowly, naturally, like something that had been waiting for permission. They held hands in silence, and that, more than any kiss, felt like the first real step. Not desperate, not impulsive, not hidden, but chosen. Kate leaned her head gently against Madison's shoulder. Madison closed her eyes, exhaling slowly, allowing herself to feel peace, for the first time in so long. They stayed like that until darkness fell. No words, no rush, just presence. The next days were full of small changes. Madison began cooking with Kate in the kitchen, clumsy and amused. Kate began attending evening walks with Madison again, pushing Effie's stroller and laughing when Madison pretended to race her. They sat closer on the sofa. They shared blankets. They brushed fingers deliberately. No kiss yet. But now, it felt like only a matter of time. But the world beyond their warm, fragile bubble was not blind. And it was not gentle. Gloria began making frequent calls now, not angry but calculated, asking when Kate planned to move back to her own place, informing Madison that investors had begun asking about her decision-making, hinting that Effie might be better raised away from emotional entanglements. Madison didn't tell Kate everything Gloria said, but Kate sensed something. One afternoon, while folding laundry, Kate spoke quietly, without looking up. "She's never going to accept me loving you, is she?" Madison froze. Her heart hammered. She didn't answer, but her silence was enough. Kate looked up. "And are you ready to stop living for her approval?" Madison looked at her, feeling something deep inside begin to shift.
Slowly.
Powerfully. Painfully. And instead of answering with words, she reached out and took Kate's hand. Not by accident. Not from comfort. But with quiet, fierce, beautiful intention. And this time, Kate didn't just hold it. She held on.
Tight.
They still didn't kiss. But sometimes, the moment before the kiss carries more meaning than the kiss itself. And in that moment, they both knew it was no longer about fear.
It was about when.
Madison felt it before it happened, like the subtle shift in the air just before a storm breaks. Not a destructive storm, but the kind that brings clarity, washing everything clean. The feeling had been growing for days, threaded through the simplest moments, Kate laughing while brushing flour off her cheek, Madison handing her coffee each morning without asking how she took it, Effie curling up between them when they watched cartoons, the way their shoulders always found each other on the couch, even when there was plenty of space. It was no longer accidental. It was no longer unspoken. It was waiting. One evening, after putting Effie to bed, they lingered in the hallway outside her door longer than necessary, both watching the sleeping little girl through the crack in the door, both listening to her quiet breathing. Kate whispered, "She looks so much like him when she sleeps." That little wrinkle between her eyebrows. Madison nodded softly. "She does," she whispered. "But when she laughs, she looks like you." Kate looked at her then, not startled, but softened. Like she'd been waiting to be seen, and Madison had finally seen her. They didn't leave the hallway right away. Something held them there, in the low glow of the nightlight, in the quiet stillness. "Madison," Kate whispered, "do you ever feel like grief isn't just sadness, but an echo of love that had nowhere else to go?" Madison's throat tightened. "Yes," she said quietly. "But I don't think our love disappeared when we lost him." Her voice grew softer. "I think it changed, and found a new home." Something broke then. Not in a painful way, but in a fragile, breathless, sacred way. You're not allowed to say something like that unless your heart means it. And Madison's heart meant it. Kate took a breath. Her voice shook. "So, what do we do with that kind of love?" Madison stepped closer, so gently that her movements felt like exhaling. "Maybe," she whispered, "we stop trying to control it." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was full. And then Kate reached forward, slowly, carefully, as if touching something holy. Her fingers brushed Madison's hand, not holding it, just feeling it. But Madison didn't let the touch pass this time. She took Kate's hand, fully, deliberately. No hesitation. No accidental brushes. Just quiet, certain choice. Kate's breath hitched. Their eyes met. And it happened. Just like that. No dramatic confession. No grand declaration. No tears. Just closeness. Natural. Inevitable. Kate stepped closer, until their bodies aligned. Not embracing, not rushing, just existing next to each other, inches apart, hearts beating in the same rhythm. Madison lifted her hand, gently brushing her fingers along Kate's jaw. Kate closed her eyes, leaning into it. Not desperately, but peacefully, like she had been waiting for exactly this. "Madison," Kate whispered, voice barely audible. "Are you sure?" Madison exhaled slowly, like breathing peace for the first time.
"Yes."
"God, yes." And then, no hesitation, no barrier, no fear. Madison leaned in and kissed her. No rush, no fire, no hunger, just deep, aching tenderness. A kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything but answered everything. Kate's hand trembled as it found the back of Madison's neck. Madison felt her entire body melt at the warmth of that touch, at the way Kate sighed softly into the kiss, not loud, but with a kind of relief that sounded like finally. It wasn't long. It wasn't intense. It was gentle and slow and honest. The kind of first kiss that feels like a promise. When they finally broke apart, neither spoke. Neither stepped back. They just stayed like that, foreheads touching, hands still holding, as if letting go would undo something sacred. It felt like a beginning, not rushed. Not forbidden. Not wrong. Just real. Madison's hand cupped Kate's cheek, and Kate looked back at her, not with confusion or fear, but with something quietly powerful.
Peace.
Madison, she whispered, breath shaky. What happens now? Madison swallowed, emotion thick in her voice. Now, we stop pretending we don't know. And that night, they fell asleep on the couch in Madison's room, wrapped in the same blanket, not fully holding each other, but close enough that their bodies gravitated toward connection, even in sleep. But peace never lasts without challenge. The next morning, Gloria called. Not the kind of call that asked, but the kind that commanded. She was arranging a family gathering, and she expected Madison and Kate and Effie to attend. Not as a family, of course. Not as what they were becoming, but as obligation, legacy, image. There are people you need to see, Gloria said sharply, and matters you need to address. Madison's stomach tightened. She knew this was not an invitation. It was intervention, control, warning. And she knew, without question, Gloria had seen enough to know what was happening here now. After the call, Madison stayed still for a long time, phone still in her hand, staring at nothing. Kate noticed. She approached slowly. She knows, Madison whispered. Kate didn't panic. She didn't cry. She didn't suggest running. She simply placed her hand softly on Madison's arm. Then we don't hide, she said gently. Madison turned to her. Searching. Are you scared? Kate nodded. Terrified. Madison's throat tightened. Do you regret? No, Kate whispered firmly. Not 1 second. And then, without ceremony, without drama, without hesitation, Kate leaned in, and this time, she kissed Madison. Still gentle, but with something different now. Something that didn't feel like a question. Something that felt like an answer.
A choice. A vow.
Love, quiet and real, had finally been spoken, without words. And outside, unnoticed through the wide living room window, Effie watched from the stairs, clutching her stuffed rabbit, smiling softly. Not surprised, whispering, like a fact she had always known, my two mommies. Madison had never felt so aware of her own footsteps as she did while walking through the long polished marble hallway of her mother's estate, each step echoing with a weight she couldn't quite name, something between dread and determination. Gloria Lockwood's house was grand in the way old money always was, with tall ceilings that made people feel small and portraits of ancestors staring down with silent judgment, and today those walls felt especially watchful. Kate walked beside her, Effie's small hand clasped in hers, and though Kate's expression was calm, controlled even, Madison could see the slightest tremble in her fingers as they approached the great room where Gloria had gathered the remaining Lockwood relatives. Madison instinctively reached for Kate's free hand, brushing her fingers lightly, but Kate didn't pull away this time. She looked at Madison the way someone looks at something they've already chosen, even if the world hasn't yet given permission. Inside the sitting room, firelight flickered against mahogany and glass, and Gloria stood near the grand piano, speaking softly to an Aunt Madison barely remembered, but the moment she saw them enter, her posture straightened, and the temperature of the room seemed to drop by a few degrees. Madison, Gloria said, her voice smooth and controlled. Thank you for coming. I see Catherine and the child are with you. Catherine and the child, not Kate and Effie. Already the lines were being drawn. Madison felt Kate's fingers tighten. Madison stepped forward. We're here because you asked. Gloria nodded once, eyes sharp.
Yes.
I asked you here because there are matters that must be addressed. For the family. For your future. For the child's well-being. Effie, holding tightly to Kate's leg, blinked at the word child as if it didn't belong to her. Gloria's gaze drifted briefly to Effie, something warm flickering there, but just as quickly it hardened. She needs stability, Gloria continued. She needs structure. She needs a mother. Her eyes flicked deliberately to Kate. But she does not need confusion. Silence. Heavy.
Real.
Madison felt heat rising in her chest, but she stayed still.
For now.
Gloria stepped closer, lowering her voice but not the sharpness in it. You have always been loyal to the Lockwood name, and to your brother's memory. But there are decisions you are making that do not reflect that honor. Kate said nothing, but the slight flinch in her posture made Madison's heart clench. Gloria continued, "People are talking, Madison. Investors have asked questions. Your father is worried. And for just a moment," her voice wavered, "I am afraid you are confusing grief with something else." The unspoken words filled the air. Something inappropriate. Something forbidden. Something wrong. Madison inhaled slowly, feeling months of fear, guilt, and quiet longing swirl inside her. But this time, something felt different. It felt steady, grounded, present. She stepped closer to Kate, not dramatically, but deliberately. "Mom," she said softly but firmly, "I am not confused." Gloria's gaze sharpened. The room stiffened. A whisper ran through the extended family like a current, as though they had all sensed something shifting. Madison continued, "What I feel isn't confusion. It isn't guilt. It isn't a mistake." Her eyes moved to Kate, just briefly, but the softness there was undeniable. "It's real." Kate's eyes filled, not with fear, but with quiet relief. Gloria's eyes widened, not entirely in shock, but in the horror of confirmation. "Madison," she said sharply, "you cannot possibly mean—" But before she could finish, a small voice suddenly broke through the tension like sunlight piercing through storm clouds.
Effie.
Clutching her stuffed rabbit, stepping forward timidly, looking not at Gloria, not at the family, looking only at Madison. Then she turned to Kate, and with perfect, innocent, unshakable certainty, she said, "I have two mommies." Nobody moved. The room froze, time suspended. No coughs. No whispers. No polite murmurs. Just the quiet, unfiltered truth of a child. Gloria looked stunned, for the first time truly speechless. Not angry, not even disapproving. Just struck by something that didn't fit into her world. Something that couldn't be dismissed with etiquette or legacy. Something pure. Something true. Effie turned back to Madison and reached out her hand. Madison didn't hesitate this time. She knelt, pulling Effie gently into her arms, and Effie leaned into her with the familiarity and trust of someone who already believed in a life that hadn't yet been spoken aloud. Kate watched, tears quietly escaping now, because it wasn't shameful anymore. It wasn't fragile. It was just real. Gloria looked at them, all three, and her expression changed. Not approval, not acceptance, but something unexpected, something human. She sat slowly, almost weakly, in the nearest armchair, eyes distant. "She calls you what?" Gloria asked quietly, not to shame, to understand. Effie, still holding Madison's hand, rested her head on her shoulder and simply said, "Mommy." Silence again, but softer this time. Not angry, not cold, just uncertain. Like the world had momentarily lost its balance, and no one quite knew where to step next. Gloria's voice trembled. "You are her aunt." Kate stepped forward, not timidly, not defiantly, but calmly. "She has room for another." Those words settled into the space between them like a thread stitching something broken. Gloria didn't look at Kate with scorn now. She looked at her with something else. Something almost fragile. "You loved my son," she said softly. "Yes," Kate whispered. "I did." "And now," Gloria said, voice quiet, "you love her?" Kate's answer wasn't rushed, or breathless, or dramatic.
It was simple.
True.
Bare. Yes.
"I do." Gloria didn't speak, but in her silence, there was something new. Struggle. Not acceptance.
Not yet.
But the first crack in a wall built by years of expectations and legacy. A crack caused not by argument, not by rebellion, but by Effie. One small, unfiltered voice saying "Mommy," and meaning it. Madison stood slowly, holding Effie in one arm, reaching for Kate with the other, her expression no longer conflicted, no longer hiding. They stood together now, not explaining, not apologizing, but present. And without raising her voice or making a speech, Madison simply said, "We are not broken. We are building something new." Gloria looked at them, not ready to embrace it, but no longer able to deny that it existed. And sometimes that is how change begins. Not with approval, not with permission, but with truth placed gently and unavoidably in front of us. Effie loosened her grip on the stuffed rabbit and held out her hand, this time to Gloria. And very slowly, uncertainly, almost painfully, Gloria reached back, touching not just the child, but the possibility of everything that came next. Madison had always believed that homes were built with walls, windows, and well-organized rooms, but in the weeks that followed the family gathering at her mother's estate, she began to understand that some homes were built long before any foundation was laid, built quietly through shared mornings, lingering glances, quiet laughter, and the warmth of knowing exactly who you want to sit beside at the end of every day. Nothing explosive happened after that day. No dramatic confrontation, no declarations, no grand gestures. And yet, everything had changed. For the first time, Madison didn't feel like she was walking on emotional eggshells. She moved through the house with ease, with quiet certainty, with something like belonging. There were still shadows of grief in the corners of the house, echoes of Matthew in pictures and memories, in the softness of Effie's eyes, but now, they weren't wounds. They were reminders. They didn't hurt every time. They didn't silence her heart. They just existed, and were allowed to coexist with something new. Love. One night, Madison walked into the kitchen and found Kate barefoot, wearing one of Madison's oversized sweaters, the pale oatmeal-colored one that hung delicately at her thighs, soft against her skin in a way that made Madison's heart ache, and she was swaying gently as she cooked, humming to herself, flipping pancakes, even though it was almost 10 at night. Madison leaned against the doorway and watched her, something soft pouring through her chest like warmth spreading slowly. Kate turned slightly, caught her looking, and instead of blushing or looking away, she smiled, a slow, quiet smile that felt like an invitation. "Can't sleep?" she asked. Madison shook her head, stepping toward her. "Couldn't." Kate didn't move away. She didn't pretend not to understand. Madison's voice was softer when she spoke again. "Sometimes I think I couldn't sleep because my heart wasn't done thinking about you yet." The silence that followed was thick, but not heavy. It was soft. Safe. Kate's eyes glowed softly, and then she said quietly, "Then sit with me." They ate pancakes on the kitchen counter, legs folded up, shoulders touching. Not by accident, not because there wasn't enough room, but because closeness had quietly become their default. They talked about small things, Effie's new habit of drawing hearts everywhere, the email from Madison's investors about a new project, the fact that Kate had successfully revived a dying houseplant and felt like she had conquered the world. And then silence. Not uncomfortable, not anxious. A kind of silence that felt like holding someone's hand without needing to squeeze. Kate spoke first. "When I moved here, I felt like I didn't belong to anything anymore. Like I was someone without a name. Just Matthew's widow." She looked at Madison. "But sometimes, when I see the way Effie looks at you, or when we're all laughing in the living room, or when I'm making tea and I know exactly how you take it, I don't feel like I'm living someone else's life anymore. I feel like I'm living mine." The words hit deep. Madison inhaled slowly, feeling something fragile but powerful unfold inside her. She didn't rush to answer. She turned to Kate, gently brushing her fingers along the side of her face, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Kate," she whispered, "you're not living someone else's life. You're helping me build one." Kate's eyes softened. No tears. Just quiet acceptance. Then, after a breath, she asked the question that hung between them for weeks. "Are we allowed to build one together?" Madison didn't hesitate. She reached for Kate's hand, lifting it gently to her lips and pressing a soft kiss to the back of it. Small, slow, reverent, like something holy. She didn't rush. She just held it there, lips on skin, a silent promise. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, we are." That night, Madison didn't sleep in her room. She and Kate fell asleep on the couch again, this time with Kate's head resting on Madison's shoulder and Madison's hand curled around hers, and something about it felt permanent, even if they hadn't said the word yet. They still weren't lovers in the physical sense, but they were undeniably something bigger than friendship. Something deeper than grief. Something steadier than want. They were becoming a family. Days passed. Weeks. And their closeness became something not questioned, not explained, but felt. Madison's hand naturally found the small of Kate's back when passing her the kettle. Kate rested her head on Madison's shoulder when they watched movies after Effie's bedtime. They no longer left distance on the sofa. Their laughter felt shared. Their mornings felt shared. Their lives felt shared. And slowly, without warning, the house stopped belonging to Matthew's absence and began belonging to their presence. But not everyone was ready to welcome that truth. Gloria remained silent for days after the family gathering.
She didn't visit.
She didn't call to interrogate. But she was not gone. She was observing and planning. One afternoon, Madison received an email from the board of her company. A gentle warning. Reputation risks. Speculation among investors. Concerns about personal life affecting leadership perception. No accusation, but clear implication. Madison stared at the screen, tension rising in her shoulders. She closed her laptop, but she didn't hide it from Kate. Instead, she walked downstairs, where Kate was helping Effie arrange dolls in a pretend school. Madison sat next to them, and in a rare moment, she invited truth into the room voluntarily. "They know," she said quietly. "They're worried."
Kate didn't panic.
She didn't cry. She simply looked at Madison, calm and unwavering, and said, "And what do you want?" Nobody had ever asked her that. Not without telling her what she should answer. Madison looked at Effie, tiny, innocent, whole, and then at Kate. "I want this," she said softly, "even if they think it's wrong." Kate's voice was soft. "And do you? Do I think it's wrong?" Madison shook her head slowly.
"No.
"I think it's the first right thing I've done in a long time." There was no kiss then. No declaration. Just a moment of clarity. One that didn't need anything else. That evening, Madison tucked Effie into bed, kissed her forehead, and lingered longer than usual. Effie looked sleepy, half dreaming, and whispered, "Mommy, don't go yet." Madison smiled. "Which one?" Effie smiled sleepily. "Both." Something inside Madison felt like it had finally, completely fallen into place. She returned downstairs, and Kate was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall, wearing the soft sweater again, looking at her not like someone uncertain, but like someone who had already chosen her. Madison walked toward her, not rushed, not impulsively. Slowly, purposefully. She didn't ask for permission this time. She simply lifted her hand, brushed her thumb softly under Kate's chin, tilting her face upward in a gesture so tender it felt like a lifetime stretching into a single second. And then she kissed her. Not like the first time. Soft and cautious.
But deeply.
Intentionally. Like love spoken clearly. Kate didn't flinch. She leaned into the kiss with a kind of certainty that made Madison's world simultaneously terrifying and beautiful. When they finally broke apart, Kate didn't ask what this meant. She didn't ask what would happen next. She simply rested her forehead against Madison's and whispered, "Welcome home." And for the first time in her life, Madison believed it. There were still challenges coming. People who would judge. Decisions that would hurt. And Gloria, who was not finished. But that night, Madison felt something she had never felt before. Hope. Madison felt the weight of her name more heavily than she ever had before, not because it represented power or legacy or responsibility, but because suddenly it felt like something she might lose, something others might take from her, especially now that loving Kate was no longer quiet or easily hidden. It was morning, gray light filtering through the windows as the house lay in that soft hush before Effie's cheerful chaos broke it, and Madison stood in her office holding an envelope her mother had hand-delivered, an envelope she had not asked for, but had known would come. She opened it slowly, already knowing it wouldn't be kind. It wasn't. The contents were clinical, structured, emotionless. Legal jargon detailing guardianship reviews, reputational risk assessments, potential conflicts of interest. Sent by the board, but clearly influenced by Gloria. It was not an attack, not directly. It was worse. It was elegant, strategic, almost polite. A proposal to secure Effie's future, to preserve the Lockwood name, to shield Madison from public scrutiny, to protect her company, her reputation, her legacy. But there was a condition. Kate would need to move out.
Permanently.
No cohabitation. No confusion for the child. No emotional entanglements. No love. You may remain involved, the document said, but as guardian and aunt only. The word aunt burned like acid. Madison sat down, hands trembling, something deep in her chest twisting, tightening, suffocating as she read the last line. This decision ensures that Effie grows up in the stability of her father's family name, without ambiguity or controversy. Ambiguity.
Controversy.
That was what they called love.
She felt sick. She didn't cry.
Not yet. She just sat there, perfectly still, perfectly silent, feeling something fragile inside her splinter. Because this wasn't a threat against her wealth or her position. It was worse. It was against Kate. Against their home. Against the one thing that had made her feel whole for the first time in years. Footsteps. Then Kate's voice, soft, familiar, grounding. Coffee. Madison didn't look up. Kate stepped inside, smiling gently, wearing that soft cream sweater that always made her look like morning light, holding 2 mugs, unaware. Her smile slowly faded when she saw Madison's face. No tears. Just devastation. The kind that lives in silence. Kate set the mugs down, quietly, slowly, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. What happened? Madison didn't hand her the papers. Instead, she whispered hollow, "They want you gone." The words hung there, heavy, irrevocable.
Kate didn't speak.
Her face didn't crumple.
She didn't gasp.
She just stood very still, listening, absorbing, slowly understanding. Madison explained, not with anger but with heartbreak, about the proposal, the conditions, the implications. How keeping Kate would mean risking guardianship battles, public scandal, investor fallout. That keeping Kate might mean losing Effie. Or losing her company. Or losing everything. Silence stretched between them, thick and painful. Then Kate stepped closer, kneeling in front of Madison, gently taking her hands, steadying the tremor there. "Madison," she whispered, "listen to me. We knew something like this would come." Madison shook her head. "Not like this." Kate's thumb brushed softly across her hand. "They're asking you to choose," she said quietly, "and I know exactly which one they want you to choose." Madison's voice broke, barely audible. "I don't want to choose." Kate exhaled, voice trembling now, but steady. "And I will never let my presence be the thing that makes you lose Effie. I won't let that happen." Madison felt panic rise. "Kate, stop." "No." But Kate gently lifted a hand, not silencing her, just asking her to hear. "I'm not leaving because I don't love you," she whispered. "I'm leaving because I do." The words split something inside Madison. "No," she whispered, voice cracking. "No, Kate, no. That's not love." "It is," Kate said softly, painfully, beautifully. "It's loving you enough to not let them destroy you for this. Loving you enough to protect Effie. Loving you enough to wait for the moment when loving you doesn't cost you everything." Madison's breaths came sharp and shallow. She covered her face, overwhelmed, undone, shaking with a heartbreak that felt too big to fit in her chest. Kate leaned forward, gently pulling her hands down, forcing Madison to meet her eyes. "I am not abandoning you," she whispered. "I am protecting you." That was when Madison cracked, not loudly, but quietly, with the softest, most devastating kind of tears, the kind that didn't fall from panic, but from love. "Kate," she whispered, "I can fight them." Kate nodded. "And one day you will. But you're not ready yet." That hurt more than any accusation. Because it was true. Madison wasn't ready. She was learning to love boldly, but She wasn't yet ready to love publicly. Not yet. Not while she was still rebuilding. Not while grief still lived in the walls of this house, lingering like ghosts, testing the strength of the living. Not while her world still whispered that what she felt was forbidden. Kate leaned closer, pressing her forehead to Madison's, their tears quietly falling between them, their hands intertwined, heart to heart, breaking and holding at once. "I will not make you choose," Kate murmured. "But one day you will choose.
Not because you have to.
But because you'll be ready." Madison didn't answer. She just held onto Kate's hands like a lifeline, like something sacred that the world could not tarnish even if it tried. Effie appeared in the doorway, holding her stuffed rabbit, blinking sleepily. "Mommy," she asked softly. And for the first time, the word hurt, because it was true, and because the world didn't allow it to be. Kate wiped her tears, steadied herself, and walked to her. Kneeling down, gently brushing Effie's curls behind her ear. "I'm here, my love," she whispered. Effie looked at both of them with sleepy confusion. "Are we still a family?" The question broke them. Madison closed her eyes, tears falling silently. Kate gathered Effie gently in her arms, holding her close, kissing her forehead with the tenderness of a mother. "Yes, my little star," she whispered. "We are always a family, even when we're in different houses." Effie held her tighter. "I don't want different houses," she whispered. Madison's heart shattered. Kate closed her eyes, voice trembling. "Neither do I." The next morning, Kate packed quietly. Not forever.
But for now.
She hugged Effie quietly, promised she'd be close, promised she'd still pick her up from school, still braid her hair, still read bedtime stories over video calls. She hugged Madison last. Not long, not desperate, but with a kind of deep, quiet certainty that said, "This isn't goodbye. This is love that waits." When the door closed behind her, the house felt too big, too quiet, too wrong. That night, Madison sat in Effie's room holding her as she slept, tears falling silently, whispering, "I will not let the world tell us what a family is." And somewhere in her own apartment, Kate cried too, but not with hopelessness, with belief. Because this love was not forbidden, not broken, not finished, just waiting. Madison had always believed that strength was measured by control, by maintaining perfect composure, by never trembling when the world demanded stability, but in the weeks after Kate left, she discovered that real strength was quieter, lonelier, and lived in the moments when nobody was watching, in the way she still set 2 cups on the kitchen counter in the morning before remembering, in the way she paused before opening the front door each evening, half expecting someone to be waiting there, in the way she tucked Effie in gently and read bedtime stories with a little more softness than before, because now she understood something she hadn't before. Love was not weakness, but it demanded courage. Real courage. The kind that risked losing everything. The house felt bigger now, echoing with spaces that used to be full of laughter, but it was not empty, because Effie was still there, and sometimes, when she walked into Madison's office holding her drawing pad, she would hold it out proudly and say, "Look, Mommy, I drew our family." Madison would look at the drawing and see 3 figures always holding hands, never apart, never in different houses, and her heart would clench with something painfully beautiful, because Effie still believed in something Madison had not yet fully fought for, a home that was chosen, not assigned. One evening, as snow began to gather quietly along the edges of the garden, Madison sat on the living room floor, a stack of work documents scattered around her, but she wasn't reading any of them. She was looking at the empty space beside her, the space where Kate used to sit, the space that still felt warm even when it wasn't occupied. Effie padded into the room in her pajamas, dragging her stuffed rabbit behind her, and sat beside Madison without speaking. After a long moment, she asked softly, "Did Kate do something bad?" Madison inhaled sharply, her chest tightening.
"No, sweetheart."
"Kate didn't do anything bad." Effie blinked slowly. "Then why isn't she here?" Madison closed her eyes, pain settling inside her like a storm tide. "Because sometimes people leave not because they don't love us, but because they do." Effie thought for a moment, then nodded with a kind of gentle wisdom only children have. Then you should love her back, she said quietly, and go get her. Madison looked at her daughter, her niece, but also her daughter, and felt something shift inside her. Something deep. Something final. Control had been her armor. But love would be her courage. The next day, Madison went to see Gloria. Not in secrecy. Not with shaking hands. But with purpose. She walked into her mother's study and stood tall in front of those towering windows that overlooked the estate, the same windows where Madison had once stood as a child, believing that love had rules and limits and legacies. Now she knew it didn't. Gloria didn't look surprised. She had been waiting. Madison, she said softly, I know why you're here. No, Madison replied, not unkindly. You only think you do. Her voice was calm, steady, unshaking. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to tell you something. Gloria's posture stiffened, but she said nothing. Madison continued, I love her. No trembling. No shame. No apology. I love her, she repeated, not because I'm lonely, not because I feel guilty about Matthew, not because I'm confused. I love her because she is kind and brave and gentle and strong and makes me better in every way that matters. I love her because she is home. Gloria swallowed, her expression tightening, but she remained composed. Madison, she said quietly, the world will not accept this easily. Then let it struggle, Madison replied. But it will not decide my life for me. Gloria looked at her daughter, really looked, and something flickered in her eyes. Not approval, not agreement, but something fragile and unfamiliar. Maybe recognition, maybe fear, but also maybe respect. And the child? Gloria asked quietly. Will you risk her stability? Her well-being? Keeping love from her, Madison said, is the greatest risk of all. Silence. Thick, heavy, necessary. Madison's voice softened. She calls us both mommy. Gloria closed her eyes. Briefly. As if something inside her was splintering, something brittle that had held for too many years. You would fight me, she whispered, if I made this a legal battle. Yes, Madison said simply. I would. And it was then, in her mother's eyes, that Madison saw not anger, but exhaustion. The exhaustion of a woman who had lived her whole life protecting a name, a legacy, a family, but maybe had never truly protected love. There were no apologies. No dramatic turnarounds. Gloria didn't suddenly accept or embrace this new version of family. But she didn't stand against it anymore either. And sometimes that is where change begins. Not in permission, but in stepping aside. Days passed. Quiet. Healing. Madison began to write emails she never thought she would write. She told the board she would not be stepping back. She told the investors that she believed leadership was not about image, but about integrity. She told the future, her future, that she would rather build something small and true than something big and empty. And then one evening, she took Effie by the hand, got in her car and drove. Across town. To the apartment with the balcony where the lights were always warm. Kate opened the door. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look uncertain. She just looked like someone who had been expecting her, like someone who had been waiting for something not urgent, but inevitable. Madison didn't speak right away. She didn't rush. She knelt down right there in the hallway and said softly, Effie has something to ask you. Effie stepped forward, clutching her rabbit. She looked up at Kate and asked, very quietly, Can we all come home now? Kate's eyes filled instantly, not with shock, but with the kind of tears that only come when something long hoped for arrives exactly when it should. Madison stood. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't ask for permission. She simply said, Kate, I don't want love that hides anymore. I want love that builds. With you. Kate didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just reached out, slowly, tenderly, and took Madison's hand. And in that quiet hallway, without witnesses or champagne or speeches or permission, something happened. Not an ending. Not yet. But a return. A beginning. Effie placed both her small hands over theirs and whispered, very softly, "My mommies." And this time, there was no fear. Only truth. Only love. Only home. The house didn't change overnight, but something in the way it breathed did. It no longer felt like a place holding its breath, waiting for something to collapse. It felt lived in, warm, full of quiet laughter, toys scattered across living room rugs, unfinished tea on the table, and 2 mugs always beside the coffee machine. One for Madison, one for Kate. It didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to be theirs. Kate moved back in on a Sunday morning. No big boxes, no dramatic scene. Just a car filled with blankets, Effie's drawings, and a houseplant she swore she wouldn't kill this time. Madison stood at the doorway as she walked in, her heart pounding, not with fear, not with guilt, but with something so simple it felt almost strange.
Peace.
She didn't help unpack. Instead, she watched. Quiet, humbled, amazed to witness not someone arriving, but someone returning, choosing, belonging. Kate sensed her eyes on her and looked up, soft, steady. "This time," she whispered, "I'm not leaving." Madison didn't answer with words.
She didn't need to.
She simply took Kate's hand, brought it to her lips, and kissed it slowly, reverently. Not to make a promise, but to honor one that was already made. They didn't try to label anything. They didn't rush to define what they had. They let it be what it already was, a life. Evenings were different now. Kate and Madison didn't sit on opposite ends of the couch anymore. They sat close, like they always meant to, one leaning into the other, legs tangled, warmth shared, hearts quiet and full.
Sometimes they talked.
Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they just existed together, and that was enough. Effie flourished. She laughed more now, slept easier, drew pictures of 3 stick figures holding hands with little hearts above their heads, not broken hearts, not confused ones. Whole hearts. One night, after dinner, while toys lay across the floor like confetti of childhood, Madison and Kate sat near the fireplace, Effie asleep across both their laps, her head resting on Kate's shoulder, her small hand curled in Madison's sweater. The room glowed with soft amber firelight, and nothing about it felt uncertain anymore. Not complicated. Not forbidden. Not wrong. Just real. Kate's voice was soft when she finally said it. "I didn't know love could feel like staying still." Madison looked at her, touched her cheek gently, and whispered, "I spent my whole life moving. And for the first time, I never want to leave this couch." The kiss that followed wasn't tentative like the first one, nor aching like the second. It was calm. Sure. Beautiful. Not a beginning, not anymore. It was a continuation. A life. The next morning brought a surprise. Gloria arrived unannounced. No cold stare this time, no firm posture, no walls raised like armor. She stood in the living room doorway and watched, silent, as Effie sat braiding strands of Kate's hair while Madison sipped coffee, cross-legged on the floor, looking more at peace than Gloria had seen her in years. Kate noticed her first. She didn't stiffen. She didn't move away. She simply met Gloria's gaze with something quiet and strong.
Dignity.
Not defiance.
Dignity.
Gloria stepped into the room, slowly, eyes moving between all 3 of them. Her face, usually unreadable, now showed something new, fragility. Effie smiled. "Grandma," she chirped, already running to her. Gloria knelt, surprised by the warmth of little arms wrapping around her. When she finally stood, her gaze rested on Kate. A long moment. No accusation. No approval. But something most people never expect from a woman like her. Effort. "You loved my son," Gloria said quietly. "And you love my granddaughter." Her voice trembled imperceptibly, and her eyes softened, barely but undeniably. "You love my daughter."
Kate didn't speak.
But she didn't lower her gaze. She held it. Steady. Respectful. Certain. Gloria looked at Madison then. Not with resignation, but with something almost gentle. "Protect it well," she whispered. And, oh, protect her well. There was no hug. No apology. No theatrics. But she didn't turn away. And that, for a woman like Gloria, was a beginning. Because acceptance doesn't always come as blessing. Sometimes it simply stops being resistance. One rainy evening weeks later, the three of them built a blanket fort in the living room, filled it with pillows, fairy lights, and hot chocolate. Effie declared it Fort Love and appointed herself chief of pillows. She handed Madison and Kate invisible crowns and made them promise, literally promise, to always stay. "This is home," she said seriously. "And no one leaves home." Nobody argued. Much later that night, after putting Effie to sleep, Madison and Kate returned to the fort alone. The fairy lights glowed softly. They lay side by side, legs tangled under blankets, quiet except for the rain. No rushing. No fear. No guilt. Madison turned to face Kate, brushing her fingers gently along her cheek. "You were never distraction," she whispered. "Or confusion." Her voice was thick with emotion now. "You were clarity." Kate didn't cry. She just looked at her the way people do when they've finally, fully arrived somewhere they were always meant to be. Madison leaned in and kissed her. Not the first time. Not the last. But this time, the kiss wasn't for answers. Or for questions. It wasn't for comfort. Or need. It was simply for joy. For presence.
For home.
Effie's drawing still hung on the fridge. 3 figures holding hands. 3 hearts. No labels. No explanations. Just love. And finally, that was enough. Thank you so much for being here and for believing in this channel. If you feel in your heart, you can donate with super thanks so I can focus more and more on this project. Your support helps me keep creating these love stories and bringing them to life for you. See you in the next video.